I bought a TypeScript book today.
Should we put the first 10 minutes of the episode just as someone streaming Rocket League on Twitch?
Yeah.
Tell everyone what we do during lunch.
We don't play Rocket League. We watch other people play Rocket League.
Did you really buy a TypeScript book?
I did.
What I've been wanting to do is go back and reset my execute program subscription thing, which is Gary Bernhardt's new site for teaching, because I signed up for it when he first launched it, and there was a TypeScript track. There's like different tracks, and I did like a few of them, and then I just stopped. And so I want to restart now that we're actually writing TypeScript.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
But it's like progressive learning where you like do a little bit and then he like emails you a reminder in a week that's like what you learned last week, and then like in a month what you learned a month ago, kind of thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Weren't you just talking about this?
Yeah, that's because it was from that the guy who wrote the article Why Books Don't Work, and he was on Econ Talk.
Nice.
And he was saying that the retention is about like there's a distance thing where like if you read a book, you remember almost nothing from it. Like if you ask someone what they learn in a book, but if you do it over time, it's kind of a better way to retain.
And that's built into Gary's site.
Yeah, execute program. Yeah.
Nice.
I think he's been working on it for like years.
And it's
quietly.
It teaches you.
SPA.
It teaches. Whoa.
Oh, it's super cool, man. It's like a compiler gets shipped. The TypeScript compiler gets shipped to the browser, and it runs against the code that you put in, and it tells you whether it works or not.
Wow.
It's like the code. Remember Code School?
Yep.
Yeah.
That like Rails for Zombies.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm. Super cool stuff. I'm excited about it. I want to try it out. But
you have a subscription?
Not a subscription, just a free account. I think it does eventually become a premium thing, but the part I was at, I just stopped before I got there.
Okay, that's awesome. I've been searching for TypeScript content.
So what did you buy? What book?
I went on Amazon. I searched for TypeScript book. This book, it was...
is it O'Reilly?
Yeah, it's O'Reilly or Manning. I think it's O'Reilly. It had a review.
That's some good iced coffee.
It had a review that was like, full disclaimer, I'm the author's parent. And I was like, all right, I'm in. No, it looked like a really new book. It had like 7 or 8 5-star reviews, all from this month or last July.
Nice.
And yeah, I just wanted something recent, top result on Amazon, good enough for me.
Cool.
So yeah, cool. I'm excited.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the TypeScript code you wrote because I think you've been doing a little bit more than I have, and it was interesting. And I don't know what some of the stuff is.
Either do I.
It was pretty cool though. I think there was like this one commit in your PR where we had these like route definitions and then route info objects or something, and then I looked at like the constructor of like the route class, and it had like 5 different things, and I was like, oh, should that be a type 2? Like and then like your next commit, you had like created a type for like the kind of argument that was allowed to be inserted, which is pretty cool. And I was like, that's kind of where my mind was going.
Yeah, it was pretty cool how I got there, because I think our constructor just took like an object that destructured, and there were like just 2 things off that object that we were using. It was like routes was an array, and then like parent route was something you could pass in. And then I started adding more options to that. And then the list got pretty long, and I was like, oh, I should type these. So I just did an inline type in the constructor, which was really easy to do. And like, once you save it, like Prettier does all the code formatting. So it's easy to add, but it's also easy to read. And then, yeah, I was looking at it, and it's like, okay, we're destructuring like five arguments. Then we have the types after that. I was like, I should just make a thing called like route options. This is why I bought the TypeScript book, because I'd like to learn like at what point in the process do I need to be thinking about this stuff. But yeah,
right, because you want to type every single call, there's no reason to do that all the time.
Right.
Console.log, whatever.
What do you mean?
Like takes a string, you just want to be able to do that. You don't want to have to write a console log
well, that's up to the browser
option or whatever
to type console log.
But like if you were writing like a server.log,
I think
I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I don't.
Well, you would want to make it say it returns a type, but you wouldn't want to say it returns an instance of like a string, but not like a custom type. I guess that's the question. When's a custom type?
Yes.
Versus when do you like have just primitives,
Right.
primitive types.
If I'm returning a Pojo, at what point do I need to turn it into a type or an interface, or I can just say, oh, this thing just returns an object with.
Yeah, key is admin, which is a Boolean, and message, which is a string, and that's it, as opposed to this thing being a concept. But just from our kind of hacking around with it in the way that we are like intuiting how to use it, I think it was clear for us, like, oh, this is like a route definition, and that is good to have a name to it,
Yep.
And then I actually did a PR which is what I had wanted to do earlier, and now I actually did feel more confident because we had started with like each route having like a name and a label and then a path, like index and then label home and then path / and then like docs is a label and then lowercase docs is the name and then path is docs. So I wanted to make the path optional, just like it is in Ember, where path is an option you pass to route definition, because conceptually, like if you give it a unique name, then you can just assume that by default the path is the name. And so now I felt way more confident because we had this like route definition, and all I did was like make path optional, and then I saw like a type error somewhere, and then what I did was then I deleted the path from a lot of the options, and then just went to the constructor and then said, like, if path is not defined, just make it route definition.name.
Awesome.
And then route info objects or whatever always have a path, because by the time you turn them from a definition to an info, they are guaranteed to have a path.
Yep.
And so I kind of knew that my code was right, I guess, in some sense. But like, I still haven't used it enough to really feel that, but like I felt it a little bit there. It just did give me a little more confidence.
Nice. I think I had two areas where I thought was really helpful. Like we had a function that was, it had like some Boolean logic in it. So it was like return like has match and an like array index of like has match. And has match like could have been a number. It could have been -1. If there was nothing. I think there was like another check
false
to make sure it wasn't
something.
-1. Yeah, it could have been undefined, and it could have been false.
Mm-hmm.
So
The compiler yelled at you?
No, I'm like doing a bad job describing this, but there was a situation where we were returning a value, undefined or Boolean.
Yeah.
And when I had to type that,
Yeah.
I was like, this is weird.
Yeah.
And so I figured out like, okay, maybe I should just do like a value or undefined.
Yep.
I should figure out how to refactor the Boolean thing out of this. So that was super helpful.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel like that made our code stronger.
Yeah.
And then the other area was I started typing our React components, which is amazing because now when I use them, I can hit, like command space.
Yep.
And
Control space. Yep.
It brings up IntelliSense and I can just see
The props that the
props.
argument gets.
Yeah.
For the component.
Yeah.
That's
and
really cool.
So, how many times have I been like, is it on click, on dash click?
Yeah.
Not anymore.
That's amazing. I'll have to start doing that. I think I like duplicated a component and I didn't understand the TypeScript like argument interface thing. And so I just need to look at that because I didn't quite get it. But pretty cool stuff. Gary Bernhardt, speaking of Gary Bernhardt, he was just tweeting a thread about some API stuff that was pretty interesting. But at the end he said, writing front-end components is fine. Rarely stick there, blah, blah, blah. APIs. So he's talking about he has a scheme for like having components define the API routes that they need in the back end, like querying the front end for them or like asking them from the components. Anyways, he says, I wouldn't even be able to consider the scheme described in this thread if it weren't for TypeScript structural type system. I think it's a very good design and I still prefer it to every other type system I know, even considering severe constraints like no type directed emit. Just a reminder that reasoning through structure as such is the core skill in programming, and most of the rest is memorization of necessary trivia.
Interesting.
So I thought that was just interesting based on kind of what we were just talking about, but saying that the TypeScript structural type system is what actually let him discuss this and think about it in such a way that he could get to this next level.
Is this like giving names to things? Like what is this?
The actual scheme he's talking about is a way for the component can shove a route into a global routing table, declares its API type and validator. The server gets the payload type by importing the client component. Right now he has to change. Anyways, the details we don't have to talk about. I mean, we can go into it as another topic, but he has to change like 6 files every time he wants to change an endpoint now, and he was getting it down to like 2 or something like that. But he was saying the point for this is just that TypeScript types is what let him talk about it and even think about it.
Nice.
So I think it'll be really good. I think actually the work in Mirage is like the most. It's the part of our work that's screaming out for that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
But yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, so you've been hacking on some Ember stuff.
Yeah. Do you have the list?
What have I been doing? I don't even know what I've been doing.
You've been staring at logos.
Yeah, that's true. I do have the list actually.
Yeah.
First one is API design, app properties versus attributes.
Yeah, I want to talk about this. This is something that came up in EmberMap Slack with Slack for our subscribers. And it was, I think, a bunch of internal Ember components. Like, you know how Ember has the input helper input component to...
Oh, Houston, Texas is calling me.
Nice. Houston, we have a problem. Okay. You can cut that. You can cut that out.
No, please don't. Please don't.
You can cut that out.
I want to know just how truly hilarious Ryan can be.
You know how Ember has...
By the way, it is ridiculous that strangers can interrupt me on my... You know what I mean?
Yeah, I had a little rant tweet about it.
Imagine you maybe thought more about it than your last joke.
Imagine you install the chat app and just anyone in the world could message you and it popped up a full message.
Yeah.
How quickly would you uninstall that?
That's
app?
true. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, you've redeemed yourself.
Someone tell Tim Apple to get that fixed.
All right. Someone in EmberMap Slack was talking about something.
Yeah. So you know how Ember has curly input, and it gives you nice input with two-way binding.
Yeah, the helper. Yeah.
So
the
it's like
helper.
It's an input helper, right? And so now in this Octane world where we're moving to angle brackets, there is that has been converted to an angle bracket component.
Okay, so it's not a helper anymore.
It's not a helper.
It's not like ember.text field. It's a component.
It's a component. So
or maybe helper. Okay.
So this is the thing. I think we, knowing the internal, not the internals, but knowing
the
enough,
history of it. Yeah.
we know that it's a helper.
Yeah.
But I think some folks might look at that and say like, oh, curly input. That's just another component for an input field. Like mental model is the same.
Sure.
It's an input. So that's being converted to
Angle bracket component.
angle bracket. And the way it's converted, you now have to make, when you pass in things to it, you have to make a distinction between what is a property and what is an attribute. And because the input helper changes its behavior based on like the type. If you do type checkbox, it renders a checkbox. If you do type text, I don't know what it is. If you do type text, it renders a text field.
Type text area.
Yep.
Type number. Yep.
I think, yeah, I know there's some logic in this Ember component input helper that like, okay, I have a checkbox. I need to do different things. So that thing is not an attribute. It is a at property.
Type?
Yes. Because a component needs to make,
Okay.
because it needs to make a decision based on type.
There's JavaScript, runtime JavaScript logic that
Yes.
depends on that value.
Yes. And so there's a discussion where it's like, oh, this is confusing. How do I know when I use type versus at type versus regular type? And we kind of like dug it. This was like interesting. We kind of like dove into the code and looked at it. And Jason Barry did a lot of deep diving here. And he found that...
I think I never caught up on this conversation because there was a lot. It was a big one, right?
Yeah, it was super interesting.
Yeah, cool.
He found that the reasons for this, there's actual JavaScript logic that depends on this, and it needs to be a property. It's not just an attribute.
Okay.
And so that got us into the discussion of like, okay, this is like kind of a confusing interface, and it makes sense because it has to, it has history. It has, when the input helper was first made, no one's thinking about angle brackets, and they should, and of course they shouldn't be.
Right.
But then we were thinking about like, okay, what if we're designing a component for our domain? Like, what if we make a link?
Right.
Like angle bracket, capital L link.
Right.
Like, should we be passing in like
href,
and should that be an attribute or should that be a property? And it's how do we know when to design these things? And so yeah, just a discussion about that. And it's kind of interesting. Like at the end of the day, with angle bracket components, one of the reasons I'm so excited for them and I think they're awesome is you get to build like your own interface. You get to decide what is a property, what am I going to use in JavaScript land, and what is an attribute that I'm just going to splat
forward
somewhere,
onto,
forward onto like the actual element.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting.
So where'd y'all land?
I think we kind of landed on like, well, you as a designer of this.
Yeah, it's you to make something that's least confusing or least surprising.
Yeah, or just, it's like you get all this power.
Right.
And so,
there is no right answer in the same way that there's
Yes.
no right answer for lots of things.
Right. Right. And I think
when it comes to component design.
Right. And I think the input helper is actually a good example of like, there's no right answer for this, right? Because we could say like it's confusing because some things need to be properties, but it makes sense. Like that it is doing different logic. They need things to be properties.
Yeah. Interesting. So like,
I kind of ended up with like, if I was building a link component, I probably wouldn't take a ref, href
as a JavaScript arg,
as a property, because I think it means something. Like people that are familiar with A tags, it means something as an attribute. So someone might say like, why is that a property? Right. When I say like, oh, there's a link with an href, that means something to you. And
right.
I don't think it might be confusing if I change that. Right. So, I think make up new names that don't exist in HTML.
Yeah. Interesting. So I also like you thinking about kind of the least surprising APIs. Like if you did design a link component for other people to use, you would probably want to provide feedback if they did pass in a value attribute, because that's something that is totally reasonable to expect to work. So you have a link and you're like, oh, this is my styled link tag. It's like an anchor tag. Okay. Or even better if it's called A. And you pass in href equals or, even class equals, and it doesn't work. Then you'd want to provide some feedback. It's like, oh, hey, you're passing in the href value, but you're using a link component. You should do this because not only do we set the href on the underlying link tag, we also add a click handler and reset some state or whatever it is, right? Scroll position or something like that, whatever the decorated thing does. So I feel like you would want to, and you can do all that stuff. You could check all that. So I feel like that's just thinking about not being surprised. Like we've done button disabled for a long time. I had this thought as you were speaking, which is like kind of a level up from this. We love to go up our levels of abstraction. So on the one hand, Octane is moving away from being more magical, right? Octane is taking Ember from being more magical to less magical. That's one way you could talk about it.
Yep.
And the input helper is a great example because input is basically supposed to be like when it first came out. It's like, how can we make like the most pleasant to use input helper version of the input thing that does what an Ember developer would expect? So you render the input helper, you pass in value sam.firstname, user.firstname, and then it just changes it to a bindings and everything works. Flash forward to 4 years, and now we're talking about Octane, and it's like, it's not really about that anymore. The question is more, how can we kind of meet developers based on where they're at, based on their knowledge of HTML and JavaScript, and offer some things that are just nice ways to make their lives easier. And it's not as much about like, how can we abstract away the DOM APIs? Like even the idea of properties and attributes being explicitly different things. Most people building Ember apps, probably most people writing JavaScript SPAs for the last 5 years, have not really had an understanding of that. That's not something that even comes up day to day.
No, and
intentionally,
we didn't really think about this till Glimmer,
till we were doing the web component stuff and trying to render things and seeing how like passing data into an attribute versus a property change and the reflection API in the web in the DOM. We didn't know about any of that. And intentionally so, right? The frameworks intentionally say that that's like a low-level thing that it doesn't matter. Except when it does, which is sometimes. And when it does, it's actually good for it to be explicitly different because it can be confusing. But it is just an interesting point that not only Ember, but other frameworks were kind of abstracting this part away. And now it's like we've decided it's not something that's worth abstracting away. And so kind of my question or like just my thought about as you were talking is like, it's easy for those of us who have been bitten by too much magic to be excited about a world with more explicitness and more escape hatches. But at the same time, I just wrote this tweet about Tailwind and the fact that I had literally forgotten how to do text transform uppercase. I forgot it was text transform. I started typing like text decoration or like something else, font style. And I was like just wrong both times. I was like, how do you italicize a text in CSS? Because Tailwind has an italics class and we've been using functional CSS for the last 2.5 years basically. And Tachyons has an italic class too. And so I had forgotten how to do that. Dude, I used to write CSS all the time. I mean, I can still write CSS. I'll be fine with it if I had to do it. But but I'm telling you, like, it just also, I have a really bad memory. So if I don't use things for 6 months, I lose it, or 6 weeks. And so my point there was like, oh, wow, this is like a detail. It's like what Gary just said. Gary just said, we're recording, right? Okay, good. Gary just said that, all these details about memorizing these details are like not the important point, right? So I feel like I just like actively eject that stuff in my brain. But like the point is like I've become, Tailwind is such a good abstraction in these ways that I literally don't have to think about that stuff anymore. And that's a good thing. And in the same way that Ember and the frameworks have tried to abstract away inner HTML, the imperative code used to render things to the screen, because they're trying to nail the declarative rendering story so that we don't have to worry about updating the DOM over time.
Yep.
That's like one of the primary purposes of these rendering layers. So the question is like, well, now we're talking about a world where like passing attributes as properties matters, and we want to be clear with our component designs because we're talking to web developers. Like, are we getting something wrong here, and we should be trying to abstract these things and plug the leaks?
I don't think so. And just using like the input component helper as an example, eventually there's so many DOM APIs and so many DOM events. Eventually you're going to want to wire up your input to do something just strange. Something that these frameworks...
Data test ID or something?
Yeah, something that these frameworks didn't think about. Maybe on some like certain event you do this and you have to prevent default, but on others you're just going to have some kind of unique pattern, and you want a good escape hatch there. And if you don't have that because of these magical components, it's frustrating. Mm-hmm. So Ember, it's like you said, Ember meeting you where you're at, where you can use an input tag.
I mean, so just kind of thinking about this out loud, like if you're a SPA developer, a JavaScript developer, and a front-end JavaScript developer, and you're using React or Ember or Vue, and like you're looking at the DOM in the dev tools. So there's part of me that says, yeah, that should like match pretty closely what you're passing in, what you're rendering, is because you're going to be using that. Whereas like the fact that these libraries are calling inner HTML doesn't matter because you're not looking at that part of it. Like you're not looking at the DOM node while you're doing your work, but you're looking at the output. And so then when you like have to do a translation with like data test ID and okay, that's data dash test dash ID, like that's like a friction. That is certainly a friction.
Yeah.
And so being able to just pass in data dash test dash ID on anything and having it show up is really nice because you just see it.
I mean, before you even go to data attributes, how about, class name?
Right.
Class names.
Yes.
Annoying.
Super annoying. Also, I didn't realize preact lets you pass in class, because another thing that Gary's been talking about was with his execute program that just moved from preact to react, and he was like, class names is dumb. Why does it have class names? And I was like, yeah, I agree. No, but it's just interesting. But like I feel like you're taking the easy way out right now. Like you're towing the party line because like, first of all, like if I was talking to a React developer, and I asked them about pain points related to properties versus HTML attributes, would they say anything? Maybe with server-side rendering? I don't know. Would they?
I don't think they would. And
so
the reason I would say this is because before I knew about this in Ember, I would never have said this was a problem.
And like React even took it to a farther degree, right? Where they don't try to like layer anything on top of the DOM. They like actively talk about like trying to abstract the DOM away, or like saying that the DOM locks us into certain things that make it hard to build UI. So we're going to make our own synthetic event system, and we're going to have a virtual DOM, and so like that layer is like basically completely hidden from you. Mm-hmm. So is that what we should be doing? Is that where Ember should really be focused? Kind of just throwing it out there.
I mean, is that at odds with the component design? Like, can't you Can't Ember do all that with, or any, I don't want to.
You're saying, is there actually a tension there? Or can they? Well, I guess the question again goes back to like, basically, I guess if there's still aspects of HTML you care about, like a data test ID, like, you know, DOM properties versus like your JavaScript layer, then maybe like a layering system versus like a complete, it makes sense. And like, I mean, to grant you the point that like class name is really stupid, and everyone writing React apps cares about like CSS class, like HTML classes and CSS that targets those, except for the people who have basically gone around that completely and use like emotion or something like that. So that's, exactly. That's an example of like, you're literally not using that anymore. So if you were writing apps like that in the way that like we write apps with Tailwind, we don't care about like the CSS class names. If they're writing apps where they're like doing their CSS all in their JavaScript, then maybe they don't care about, maybe like that's the last attribute that they actually ever cared about in HTML.
But I don't like this as an answer, because
it's too
eventually
like,
you will need a class.
Yeah.
You will need a class name, and it should, like, you shouldn't have to think that hard to go down to the next level.
Unless abstracting that level saves you like a ton of headache in like 99% of the case. And like, if you want to make a link component with an href, no one cares.
I mean, fair.
I don't know.
It's all trade-offs, right? I will say that I think with this properties versus attributes thing, I think this is something where it's like time will tell.
Yeah.
And the components that we're writing right now, where we're saying like, oh, this is going to be a property and this is an attribute. You know, in a year from now, when I have to come back and edit these components,
we'll know if it was good.
Yeah, I'm going to know within like 15 seconds whether this was a good idea.
And conventions will come out and show and stuff. By the way, for the record, like the little bit of angle bracket work I've done so far, I've absolutely loved the @ sign, the property versus attribute. Like, oh, I'm passing a class. Oh, I'm passing like a model, and like seeing @user and then class equals or data test ID equals, I absolutely love it. So I'm just kind of like playing devil's advocate here. That being said, like if you do think about, we've written a million button components in Ember, and before we had this kind of property versus attribute distinction, like we use disabled, right?
Yeah.
And disabled is an HTML attribute, but you know, and we would bind it to the HTML attribute. And, you know, but did that ever come across our minds that it was like, oh, this is confusing. Am I passing, me as a caller of your button, I need to disable it. Do I do this, you know, is disabled this or that?
Yeah, totally. And like we'd have it where it's like, oh, if you're passing in a task and the task is running, we're going to make like the disabled be an alias to task or read only.
Or derived or something.
Yeah, that's a word. Derived from task is running. But yeah, now it's weird if I tell you there's a button that takes a property called disabled that's like, wait a minute, like you're thinking, does your mind immediately go to like implementation detail? Like, oh, I wonder why they're taking this @disabled.
See, I think, it's interesting. I think if I had to answer right now, I would want, if I was like using Bootstrap button or something, I would want it to take an @disabled, which is a property in JavaScript, and they can do all sorts of stuff like disable my click handler. And if I tried to also pass in a disabled attribute, they would say, oh, you're passing in a disabled property. Like we're going to derive the disabled attribute from that, and we don't let you pass both of them in because they could just get out of sync and that would be confusing. If you want to control the disabled attribute yourself, pass it in and don't pass in a property. And here's how you would do the other things that the property behavior like controls behavior-wise.
Interesting.
I think that's what I would want, because like to me, like the app disabled is like sugar. It's like nice on top because we can do other things like disable the click handler. Same with like an input component that takes like a value and like updates the value, data on actions up and all that stuff.
Yep.
So
I like that. And this goes back to what you originally said, which is just having good error messaging.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Yeah.
So yeah. Next component I write is going to have a did receive atters. It's just going to be 50 lines of,
of assertions, validations.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty interesting. Hey everyone, just wanted to take a quick break to tell you about today's sponsor, and that's Next Release. Next Release is a tool that helps you automate your product's release notes. Are you tired of getting asked, what did we ship last month? If so, you should check out Next Release's automatic release note generation and distribution tool. It integrates directly with GitHub, so it just works with your existing pull request workflow. All it takes to set up is 3 clicks. Then, all your release notes will be generated based on your team's actual work. Whether you need to update your colleagues over Slack, email, or just with a Markdown or Word document, Next Release can push out updates when you've added features, fixed bugs, or even just changed some copy on the marketing site. So stop wasting time searching through Jira, Slack, and GitHub just to find out what you did last month, and give Next Release a try. It's going to save you and your team a ton of time. Head on over to nextrelease.io/Ember, and you can sign up for a free 30-day trial. And guess what? Next Release is actually an Ember app, and it's built using modern Ember concepts from Ember Octane. So as a special thank you to EmberMap listeners, you can actually get a 10% discount for the entirety of your subscription. All you have to do is mention that you heard about Next Release on the EmberMap podcast when you sign up. Again, that website is nextrelease.io/Ember. Huge thanks to Next Release for sponsoring the episode, and now back to the show. Oh, I think I got a voicemail from that Houston call. It's exciting.
Help, we're stuck in space.
Oh, they can't transcribe it. That probably means that it's who knows what. Hope we're stuck in space, did you say?
Yeah.
TypeScript, we talked about TypeScript a little bit. Anything else you wanted to say when you wrote this down? You were just wanting to chat about it?
Yeah, that we're using it. I like it, and the autocomplete stuff is awesome.
I also saw, who else did I see? Like, oh yeah, Ryan Florence was tweeting about asking folks who use TypeScript, and like everyone does, and he was like, oh, I thought it was going to go away. You know, I thought it was going to be a fad. I was going to be able to wait it out, and it's like, man, I think TypeScript is like more popular than React.
Isn't there some?
It's crazy popular.
Well, one of the things is it's really easy to add to your project. You can just add it.
Nothing changes.
You rename one JavaScript file to a TS file, and you don't even have to change anything. And then you can start adding types. So it's the onboarding story. It's really easy.
How long will this take?
Oh, yeah. This is
project management.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about this just because like, I feel like whenever we talk about this, you always have good insights. I've been doing a lot of client work lately, and one of the questions I get asked is how long this will take. And it's kind of like, I've been working on a bunch of different stuff, so I'm getting asked this a lot. And then I just reminded that like, it doesn't matter what you're working on. This question always comes up. I feel like having done a bunch of client work over the years, I'm pretty good at answering this question. But I wanted to talk about it just because it's one of the things that always comes up. I don't think it's ever going away. Mm-hmm. And I kind of want like
a back pocket kind of card you can just play.
Yes, like not something
not in a
that's
bad way,
right? Not something that's rude or like
sure
trying to be clever, but just something that's like, oh, here is your mental framework of how long this will take.
Totally, it like gets rid of the anxiety around the question in the way that a lot of Jonathan Stark's advice does.
Yes, and I've noticed too. On teams with a lot of programmers that like oftentimes like programmers don't want to disappoint. They're kind of looked at as like the know-it-all of the system. And so you want to, this is like, how long will this take? Is often an opportunity to like deliver good news. Tell the person what they want to hear.
Yes. Make people happy.
Yeah.
Please them. Yeah.
One of the things one of my default moves here is I do the, there's a 6 hour version, a 6-day version, a 6-week version, a 6-month version of every feature.
Yeah.
So let's, you tell me.
Yeah.
And
what's your appetite for it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a great.
That's a nice way because it turns it around.
Yes. And it also, we get to actually talk
the reality
about
of the fact that there's so much unknown that goes on in a lot of the work we do. And
you're not just pushing the question back to the person because they're going to say, okay, well, what's the difference between the 6-hour version? And then you two get to work together.
Right.
By the way, you resolve a whole bunch of assumptions when you talk about the difference between 6 hours and 6 weeks.
That's good.
So that's been helpful.
That's good.
There's a great, it's like Spider-Man drawn in like 10 minutes, 1 minute, 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So that's a great little little thing to remember.
Right.
It's like great little visual of how long
what you
will this
get
take.
if you're willing to wait or pay more or whatever.
Yeah. I don't.
Yeah, it's still not completely satisfactory in terms of like having that response. It's almost like, it's almost like you want to be able to say, how long will this take? You say, I don't know. But that's not, but you almost want to be able to say that in the same way when someone asks you like, oh, what's your hourly rate? I don't have an hourly rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of, again, the point is like to get you talking about why the person's doing the project and what it's worth to them. And, that's really what software development is about too.
Also too, it's like,
it's just not a fixed input output relationship, is it? I mean, it's just,
I guess one of the things I don't like about this question also too, like just, okay, I have to be able to answer this, right? Like people are lining up future work. They're making promises based on this. Like
in other situations we've been in, like departments are asking the department we're working with, there's a dependency graph.
Yeah. A massive dependency graph.
Yeah.
And it's not just me. There's input from other people and other folks, but it does roll up to this. So you can't like, you can't say, I don't know. There's too many unknowns.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to be successful.
It's not helpful either. I think the point you made is really important for people to understand. And like, we still don't know maybe the best way to communicate that, but that it's just not, it's not a, independent variable. The time it takes depends on your appetite for it, how much you're willing to wait, what kind of version of a feature you want. It's not an independent variable that's given to the system. It's dependent.
Yes.
So
maybe that's it. Maybe it's when that question comes up, it's more about unpacking.
How long does what take?
Yeah.
How long will it take you to do X? Well, maybe X is something that's very known. And we've talked about the book Shape Up, which if you're listening to this and you haven't heard it, we'll put it in the show notes. It's from the Basecamp folks who have thought a lot about this question of basically how to like estimate work or not estimate work, and how to better deliver software, which is what this is all about. And so, I mean, so many people just go over budget in extreme ways.
That's one of the reasons I brought this up, because in the past, probably more times than not, like on just all sorts of projects, you get asked how long this will take. You say 2 weeks because you're a programmer and everything in your mind takes 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But you say 2 weeks and it takes you 4 weeks, and like nothing, there's no consequence to that.
Right.
And it seems bad from like you, first of all, like it's bad you gave an estimate that was wrong. You spent time thinking about something that didn't matter.
Yeah.
It just seems like there's a lot.
Now, in the projects that you're working on, do you have any sort of like, this ticket is a 1, this is a 2, this is a 3, this is a 5?
No, it's funny. We don't have like a formal ranking system like that, but I was joking with one of the project managers where they were saying like, oh, I can always tell if someone says like, oh, that's easy, I know it's going to be quick. Or if they say, oh, I have to think about it, it's going to be this. So there's not like a formal
You're saying once
system.
you work with someone enough, what their phrases mean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's that implicit understanding of how people talk about things, where you can back out estimates.
I was listening to Copy Paste podcasts, and Chris Freeman was talking about companies where juniors will be successful. We've talked about this before, jobs we worked at, where it would work, where it wouldn't. And, if everyone's kind of hero engineering, it's like going to be really hard for a junior versus, what Chris said, which I like the way he put it, which was basically, if you're a junior and you're interviewing somewhere, you could ask like, oh, what does your like backlog look like? And do you have like lots of 1-point tickets? That's like a sign that's like, it's a good sign, because you can come in there and just take those bitten off tickets that are like shaped up and they're small, and basically that's like a good sign for that. So I was just thinking like, a lot of times when we do consulting with like smaller teams or working with smaller teams, like we don't formalize the process the way we have in other jobs or with other companies, and maybe you miss out on some of that. Whereas if it was a little more people and you need a little more communication, you would be doing like the scoring of the cards and that way. Also, like when you say, how long is this going to take? to me, one thing is like, well, if we don't know how long how long did the last feature take? Do we have an answer for that? If we don't, then I'm not going to guess. What we need to do is measure it this time. We need to guess and like measure it. And then we can say like approximately how long did this take last time? Because otherwise we're just lying to everyone in this room. Right?
That's great. You're basically saying that like you've gotten to the point where you've had to ask me this, and maybe we could do something further above or below, further ahead in the process.
Yeah.
Like scoring tickets.
Yes.
Or have reviewing previous work to back out those answers.
Exactly. Back them out. That's the thing, is that they should be derived from the work. And we've always found the most success when that happens, when it's like, how long is the next section of the app going to take? Well, how long did the previous section of the app going to take? Or did it take, right? Okay, it took 6 months. Remember when we thought it was going to take 1 month? Okay, it took 6 months. My best guess right now is about 6 months, like just without knowing anything else.
Yeah. Surprising how well that works too.
Yeah, exactly. So derived values is good, and then also if you are like rating the cards, you can say, oh, okay, yeah, on average like 1 point cards take this long, or like on average like Ryan's really bad and he marks 1 point cards that should be 5 point or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But there's still like a different version. I feel like there's still a more succinct answer to that question, that like also like put yourself in their shoes, right? How long is this going to take? Like, do you think there's a problem with that question?
No, I mean, maybe there's something else they want to know, and they're using how long is this going to take as a way to get an answer to that.
Because like we've been working on this Mirage stuff, and one thing you were tackling was like this roll-up build stuff, and I just feel like if I was trying to plan out some stuff and I felt like that was a blocker for something we wanted to do, there's just,
well, I would tell you
it's not going to take a year, but I wouldn't ask you how long is it going to take to get our roll-up build working, because
and I also wouldn't. I mean, I seriously would not answer you. I would just cross my arms and make a pouty face. No,
that's just such a. There's so much unknown. Yeah. So, I'm just wondering. Like, I would never ask that question, and so are the people asking these questions like?
You know what
I mean?
Yeah. Given the situation, I guess it's good because I have insight to both sides here, right? Because we're writing the work and we're also planning the work.
Right.
But I would say like what is a dependency on this roll-up stuff?
Right.
And what happens, like why is it so important?
And this is maybe where like the shape up stuff comes from, which is just like, and I need to read the actual full book. I've read bits and pieces of it. But the shaping up process is a very much a discovery, unknown territory, and they get better at the shaping up process, but it is like unknown. And at the end of the day, though, there's still ways that we can truncate the 6 months of work into 6 weeks of work. Even with the roll-up stuff, we had an escape hatch, which was just, all right, use a UMD build for now.
Yep.
And so that still is like, what is the 6-hour version? And it's just that. And it's not ideal, but it's based on priorities and it's based on all this stuff. So there's lots of times we do stuff like that. So maybe that discussion is the answer to that, which is like, you want to start from the appetite. And the appetite for it is based on the work required as well.
I don't know
if that would hit home with them or people in that position. Who,
I have to read Shape. I know you've read some. I haven't read any.
Yeah.
I think if I asked you how long something would take and you said, well, what is your appetite for it? I would be like, as soon as possible.
Yeah.
You know, like I think maybe there's like the discussion can help get out some of the assumptions.
Yeah.
Where it's like, if you look at that Spider-Man drawing, the 10-second one barely looks like Spider-Man.
Right.
So you would get out some of those assumptions. Like, okay, is it okay if it's just a little face with some, weird eyes?
Right.
I don't know. That's how I describe my code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you've had success with that, with those discussions. I mean, but you still feel like there's something missing.
I basically,
or it's like hard. You're starting from scratch each time.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. If you ask me to make a new component, that's not hard.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go in and make a new component. I'm not going to have to. I have like a framework for thinking about it.
Right.
I also don't see myself ever working on a project where someone doesn't ask that question.
Right.
And I think as like, even with us as like team size grows, like if we bring more people in and work on Mirage, we might start, we'd have to line up dependencies.
Yeah, totally. Even when our friend was helping us with the tests, Alexander, and it was like, oh yeah, how long that's gonna be done, because I was thinking about it, and so.
And maybe it's something. Maybe it's just like, okay, well, it's good. We'll try to catch ourselves and ask why we're asking this.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't fault people for asking me that question. So I don't want to say that like, oh, you shouldn't be asking.
Sure. Or come back with like
something.
I don't know, or whatever. Something not helpful.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah, that was good.
It's interesting. I think we had one more thing in the backlog, which was about Mirage.
Is your desk waterproof?
No, we need to get a new thing. Somehow it creates water.
If you're interested in what I'm doing, you can go watch the video podcast. Nothing to see here, buddy. The Mirage. Something I ran into this week.
Is it a relatively quick thing? Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, it's quick.
If it goes long, we can talk about it more next time.
One of the apps I'm working on, we have a lot of data. I've talked about this before, just like a lot of data, and we have Mirage factories to create all this data, and it takes a while. And we've done a few things to speed that up. Like we put like just some JSON in the application, and we load the JSON right into basically fixtures instead of factories. Mm-hmm. You can think of it like that. I wanted to figure out like why my factories were slow. I know they're slow because I have a lot of them. But I wanted something like, I was thinking like, how there's like after create? Is there a way that like, okay, I guess I should back up here. I want a way for me to like track my factories and their performance without bugging you to say like, oh, you should add some like factory tracking code to Mirage because there's a million things and that's the last thing you want to do. So I was thinking like, what are some APIs that could exist in Mirage that would let me get at this, but that weren't specific to like tracking slow factories. So how there's like an after create? What if there was like a before create where I could put like a timer and then end that timer and after create and somehow sum these things up? What if there was just some like
some lower level hook?
Yeah, some lower level hook. Every time Mirage called factory.create, it could I could wrap that code. So I could time it, or I could do like, there's probably other stuff I could do here that I'm not even thinking of now.
Right.
But yeah, that was just a thought I had. Like how could I start to debug this in a way that doesn't put a lot of burden on the library?
Right. First thought, it was like, because we still use that funky extend thing. I think if we had ES6 classes, like a lot of the debugging stuff in the native like dev tools would be a lot easier to see. Whereas right now, some of it's like obfuscated because of that weird extend thing. Second is like basically what you were doing earlier, which is like the general answer to this question is like using like the fire, what is it? Fire graph or something?
Yeah.
Flame graph.
Yeah. Flame graph.
And that shows you, you should be able to see the stack and like,
the thing is like,
but you couldn't find the name of the factory but like that might be because of extend.
Yeah. I also don't really care. Like if there's gonna be a bunch of Mirage code after, like while I'm creating a factory that has like wire up associations, like I don't know if I care about that. I mean, I guess I do in some sense, but if I could like get a bucket of like, listen, when we booted your app in Mirage, we created like 100,000 users. They like, here's like a little tree.
Interesting.
But it's something that, like I could create. Like I don't have to ask you like, make a tree of every factory that calls every factory. Like give me like almost it's like if you had like a before and after, I could start pushing that stuff onto a stack. And then like every time that stack got to like 1 or 0, I could see basically like everything that was pushed on that stack and everything that was popped to the stack was related to the item below it. And I could start to like figure out like.
That's why you're saying like a before or like a did create kind of thing. And you just like be able to increment a counter with like a type or something like that.
Yeah. Or some timer or just, some timer. Yeah. And someone pointed out like that maybe there's some stuff with like moment that's slowing the app down. There's like some complicated moment logic, and it's just like,
how would you know
that? And it's just like, oh, because I was fiddling with that one day and I added a bunch of moment stuff and the thing slowed down.
And you're definitely not the first person who's had these issues with like bigger apps. I talked to someone at EmberConf who was having performance problems with their like Mirage setup, and like we once the app booted, we looked at the DB and there was like 15,000 record, like 10, maybe more, maybe even more, like 100,000 or something like that, and so definitely having more insight into that would be really good, because when I first wrote all that code, I never even thought that was going to be a case where people were going to see the database with that much data. Although it's like, again, it's JavaScript memory, it should be super fast. And so there's something with the recursive stuff. I've basically never had to make it fast myself. And so, yeah, that's why it's like that. But
again, like this might not even be like, I might be totally, if you were like Mirage can't get any faster, that's the way it is. Like
you still would want to know, because you could fix it in other ways.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm like totally, that's totally okay answer.
Right.
And I'm like not looking for you to speed up Mirage.
Right.
Because again, that like puts a burden back on you.
Totally.
I guarantee you
insight
that I wrote an after create once that like did a create list just to wire up a relationship, or I have some traits that are just adding a lot of data that maybe they don't need to be there.
Right.
And I just did this because at the time that was like what I was thinking.
Yeah, totally.
So
yep, that's good. I mean, this is honestly an area I don't have a ton of experience in, so it'd be good to learn about the profiling stuff and learn good ways of doing this, because I don't really have like a lot of opinions or expertise here.
Yeah, maybe
the reason, like my thoughts when you're talking about like a did create hook and like putting a timer there, I feel like why not? That's the kind of thing we should be able to do with like the flame charts and all that kind of stuff, or using a timer before our code or
So I can take you through like how I use Chrome, and I'm not an expert here. I did console.time at the start of my scenario and then console.time at the end. And then I saw that it was,
8 seconds or something.
Yeah, 8 seconds.
Yeah.
And then I can go into, this is really cool, I can go into the Chrome performance tab. It's record a session, refresh the page, and then end the recording as soon as the page loads, because I know Mirage has done its thing. And it will mark in the timeline graph, it'll mark with what my console.time logged. So it's like super easy. Like I did like console.time Mirage scenario, and then console.time end Mirage scenario at the very end of the file. And that just shows up as a label. Yeah. So I was like looking at it, it was like Mirage creation, or it's like Mirage scenario creation. It's like, that's weird. How did it know? I was like, oh, wow.
That's neat.
So I went in there, but I opened the flame graph and I can see a bunch of server creates. It was hard for me this is where I kind of got stuck. I couldn't see like the arguments to them.
Yeah.
There was a whole bunch of my code intermixed with Mirage code. And it's really, I guess I don't care what Mirage is doing under the hood.
You just want to know if there's a hot path or something like that. Yeah, I would like to learn from someone or watch a talk or something like that, because this would be good to understand.
Again, too, it's more
thinking for it. It's not thinking about problems we don't know yet, and thinking about what hooks are low enough level that need to be exposed so folks can solve these problems themselves when they run into them.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Totally on board with that. Yeah. You can't foresee everything as a library author, but you don't want to. If something we're doing right now in the way we're invoking all that stuff is like making it, obfuscated, or making it like hard for you to have a handle to, then we could rewrite it in a way that makes it easier. Then we should do that for sure.
Yes. So that's the hypothesis there, is going away from extend and going towards like class.
Yeah, could potentially help.
Could help. Yep.
That's my guess, or that at least it would help. So yeah, interesting.
Maybe I'll open an issue on the Mirage repo that just kind of outlines some thoughts. I can share some stuff. That'd
be good. Sometimes people chime in, people watch that. At least with Emerson and Mirage, they did. Yep. Sometimes I open things and people were watching it, so that's good.
Cool. Yeah. Also, too, like the way like I said, the way we've fixed this is like we'll just load a bunch of JSON files, because we need the factories to like create the initial data, but once we have it, we don't really need it. So that's the way we've gotten around this. But
caching, basically, in some way.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. File. With a file.
Use a file. Recently, didn't you use like the Express server? That's kind of clever.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd recommend that, because I feel like I dug into some Mirage areas to get around that. But you know, it's just there. One of my concerns is like as apps grow with Mirage,
Right.
you don't want to get into a spot where it's like, oh, just use a JSON file, and then it's like, okay, that works, that gets you this problem solved, but now you've lost the benefit of factories.
Right.
So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm excited to get the main docs poured over, and we can start working on Mirage server again. There's a lot of good stuff that's going to be coming there, and just it's going to feel good to do some house cleaning, get the ES6 classes in there, get it working in Node, get test coverage for all that stuff. It's going to feel awesome.
Yeah.
And just actually be able to refactor a lot of it, and also like try to be strategic and think about maybe instead of just trying to answer everyone's future requests and do what people are asking for, the high level, what are the lower level things we can expose?
Yep. Hooks,
Making a middleware.
Middleware.
Yeah, exactly.
All that stuff.
Yep. Cool. So that'll be neat. All right. Now that Ryan's falling apart here.
Talk about Mirage and I just go off.
Allergic.
Yeah. There you go.
Cool. All right. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Bye.